You think you lost 3 hours to laziness. You may have lost them to 30 seconds of shame. You say one slightly wrong sentence in a meeting, or send a message that sounds too eager the second you reread it. Then your cursor sits over the file you were supposed to open, and instead of starting, you replay that one line again. This has a name. Thomas Gilovich and colleagues documented the spotlight effect. People reliably overestimate how much other people notice and remember their mistakes. That matters because the small event in the thumbnail and the stalled afternoon in the title are often the same problem. What you call procrastination can begin as social overexposure in your own head. You read it as weak character. The more accurate read is that your attention has been pulled toward possible judgment and away from the task in front of you. By the end, the thing you called laziness will look different. A brief awkward moment can expand into real lost work time without any change in your intentions. If the mistake lasted seconds, why does your system keep paying for it long after everyone else has already moved on? The spotlight effect is the starting point, but it works because it plugs into older systems built for social survival. In the Gilovich, Medvik, and Savitsky experiments, including the well-known Barry Manilow t-shirt study, participants expected far more people to notice the shirt than actually did. The popular version is simplified, but the core finding is solid. We are bad at estimating how visible we are to other minds. When an awkward moment lands, your threat system, including the amygdala, treats possible judgment as relevant. Attention narrows. Self-monitoring rises. Your working memory, the limited system that holds information in mind for the next step, gets occupied by replay, editing, and consequence checking. Now the task itself changes. The document is no longer just a document. It is linked to the moment that felt exposing. Humans evolved in groups where status and exclusion carried real cost, so the brain is biased to keep checking social errors. In a digital environment, that same bias can attach to email, meetings, chats, and calls all day. The result is simple. A small embarrassment can redirect mental resources away from the work you were trying to do. That redirection is where the lost hours begin. First, the awkward moment gets tagged as important because it may affect how other people see you. Then replay starts. You rehear the sentence. You imagine their expression. You draft a correction you never send. Each pass keeps attention locked on the social event instead of the task queue sitting in front of you. This is not abstract. Working memory has limited capacity, and when part of it is busy with self-monitoring, the next action becomes harder to hold steady. The modern environment makes this worse. A meeting ends, but the message thread is still there. The call is over, but your calendar shows the same people again tomorrow. Email, chat, and shared documents preserve the scene and keep cues alive. That means the brain does not get a clean signal that the thread is finished. It keeps checking. In plain terms, embarrassment steals time through attention. Then avoidance starts to look useful. Not opening the file gives brief relief because it delays contact with the place, person, or task now linked to the mistake. That short relief is real, and well-documented learning research shows that relief can strengthen escape behavior. So the delay is not empty. It teaches. The next time the task appears, your system has already learned a shortcut: step away, reduce discomfort, come back later. By then, the original mistake may be small, but the pattern attached to it is larger, and the next question is how that escape response gets reinforced enough to outlast the embarrassment itself. That reinforcement gets clearer in the part most people never hear about: the Barry Manilow study. The important finding was not only that participants thought more people noticed the shirt than actually did. It was that the moment felt central because it was central to them. You were inside the body wearing the shirt. Everyone else was one observer among many things competing for attention. That difference in viewpoint matters after an awkward meeting too. You remember the sentence, the pause, the heat in your face, the exact line in the chat box. The other person is usually moving to their next task. So the false spotlight is not just an error in social math. It is an error in exposure memory. Your estimate of how public the moment became is inflated because you experienced it from the center of your own attention. But this is where most people get it wrong. The problem is not just bad social math, it is what that bad math does to behavior right after. The tab stays open, but you do not touch it. You hover over the inbox that contains the thread. You decide to make coffee first, then reorganize notes, then check one harmless site. Nothing dramatic happened. Yet the task linked to the mistake now carries a small social charge. That is where avoidance learning turns seconds into hours. In behavioral psychology, escape gets strengthened by negative reinforcement. When you step away and discomfort drops, the drop itself teaches the step away response. Not because the work became objectively harder. Because your system got paid in relief. One awkward Slack message can lead to 20 tiny exits in a row because digital work places the trigger and the escape route side by side. The file is there. So are 6 tabs, a calendar, a feed, a search bar, and busywork that feels safer. The bigger cost is cumulative. Time use research repeatedly shows that work is broken by interruptions and switching, and a modern working life is measured in weeks and decades, not single afternoons. If embarrassment keeps tagging ordinary tasks with social threat, the loss compounds quietly through delayed starts, shallow work, and repeated re-entry costs. Then the pattern hardens into identity. Daryl Bem's self-perception theory made a simple point. People partly infer who they are by watching what they repeatedly do. If you repeatedly hide after friction, you can start calling that laziness, weakness, or being the kind of person who always spirals. But the record points somewhere else. A protection loop can look like personality from the inside. If that is true, what actually changes the loop without asking you to overpower it by force? The turn starts when the target changes. If the problem were low character, the answer would be effort. But if the problem is a learned social threat loop, effort is too late. By the time you are arguing with yourself, the cue has already grabbed attention, replay has already started, and avoidance has already offered relief. What works better is changing what the brain learns from the moment. The brain changes through neuroplasticity, which here means it strengthens the pattern you repeat. If the repeated pattern is embarrass, replay, escape, relief, that chain gets easier to run. If the repeated pattern becomes embarrass, reality check, tiny re-entry, task continues, a different chain gets learned. The first part is shrinking the false audience. That matters because self-focused attention amplifies the sense of exposure. Writing down what actually happened, what evidence exists that others noticed, and what evidence does not exist interrupts the inflated estimate. This is close to the cognitive diffusion used in acceptance-based approaches, treating the thought as a mental event, not a verdict. The second part is immediate re-entry. Exposure-based treatment has shown for decades that staying in contact with a feared cue without escaping changes the fear response over time. In plain terms, when you reopen the file or send the plain correction before relief gets purchased through avoidance, you teach the system that contact is survivable. The third part is environmental. Attention is limited. If the escape routes are one click away, the loop spreads fast. Reducing tabs, hiding feeds, closing chat for a set block, and placing the next concrete action in view removes competing exits at the moment the threat tag appears. Then identity changes for a factual reason. You stop reading the pattern as who you are and start reading it as what your system learned. That is the practical shift that makes the next steps work. So the sequence is simple. First, cut down the imagined audience. On paper, write the event in one sentence. Then write 2 columns. What I know others saw, and what I am assuming they concluded. Keep it concrete. I misspoke in the meeting belongs in the first column. They all think I am incompetent belongs in the second unless you have direct evidence. This does not erase embarrassment. It reduces the exaggeration that keeps attention trapped. Second, break the escape reward quickly. Re-enter the avoided task in the smallest visible step available. Reopen the document. Send the one-line reply. Join the meeting and speak once. The step should be small enough to do before drift begins, but real enough that you stayed in contact with the trigger. That is how the loop stops getting paid for avoidance. Third, change the setting around the trigger. Remove the easy exits for one work block. Close extra tabs. Put the phone out of reach. Hide the feed. Leave only the file, the message, or the agenda and the next action you can take on it. You are not proving discipline. You are reducing the number of escape paths available when attention gets pulled. Fourth, update the label. Not I am lazy. More accurate is, my system overreacts to embarrassment, then tries to protect me by leaving. That description is useful because it points to something trainable. So the opening line has an answer. You did not lose those hours because you are lazy. You lost them because embarrassment captured attention and avoidance kept rewarding escape. Embarrassment steals time through attention, but only when the loop goes unrecognized. If this changed how you see it, the next one goes deeper. 30 seconds of shame did not reveal your character. They triggered a pattern you can train.